And I presume as Sioux Falls has grown, the project sizes and the intricacies of that have grown as well. Like some of the projects we've seen downtown have required bigger pieces, bigger materials that has changed.
Correct. I've seen that in the 20 years that I've been here. The size of say, base plates has grown because the sizes have grown for the beams and columns and those type things. So we've had to increase some of our cutting capabilities. We got a new piece of equipment about 6-8 months ago that's helped us with some of that. We went through a stretch here as we were growing that we were outsourcing quite a bit of things, and it's always easier when you can keep it in-house. And for the most part, we're able to keep most things in-house.
Thank you for joining us. We know that your time is valuable, and we appreciate you spending it with us.
This show is talking about beyond the blueprint and what happens kind of behind the scenes of the construction world, and also what happens in our lives from a family business and ranching and all the things that keep us building and moving forward.
And if there's something that you heard that resonates with you, whether it was a joke, an idea, please like this, share it with someone you know, and feel free to leave comments. We look forward to seeing what you have to say.
Let's dig in.
Welcome to the Two Bs in a Podcast. I'm Brad Jans with Jans Corporation, joined again by my brother Brian. Today we're joined with Mike DeJong from P&M Steel. Thanks for being here, Mike.
Thanks for having me here.
You bet.
Mike, we appreciate you taking the time out of your day to be with us. You and I have known each other for a really long time. We've been involved in building your building from a construction manager standpoint and been back to do some additional work. But for those that are watching today, tell us, what is P&M Steel? Where are we at?
P&M Steel. So 3rd Gen. P&M Steel started in 1970 by Lou Profile, and he took it to 1985, and then his son Tate came back into the business and took it to 2018, I believe, and that is when, kind of funny story, Lou had to court Tate pretty hard to come back into the family business, and it took a little bit of time, and then role reversal, same thing. Tate had to court Catron to come back into the business, and they made that jump back in, I want to say she came back in 2016 or 17, somewhere in there, and then he was looking to retire. He was wanting to see the next chapter of life, and so he retired in 2018, and that's when Catron and I took over for him.
So how did you end up here? Was it something you had always thought about, or?
No, actually not. So I had come back from a deployment. I served some time in the military and came back and got married. And my wife had said, we're going to live in Sioux Falls. I wanted to live in Brookings. I didn't win that battle. So Tata heard that I was looking at moving to Sioux Falls and had reached out and said, hey, we're looking for a buyer, and why don't you come in and interview? And so I did, and got the job, and then just kind of worked my way around the shop and worked in different roles, and was getting ready to deploy in 2011, and had went to Tate and said, you know what, if there's an opportunity, I'm always looking for more. I was always looking for the next kind of step, and it eventually led into becoming president of the company.
It's awesome.
It's very cool. And I mentioned your service. Thank you for your service to our country. Why don't you start a little bit back? Where did you grow up? How did you get into joining the Army? And tell us a little about your family history.
So I grew up on a family farm in Platte, South Dakota. My dad was in the Air Force, and his dad was starting to had developed Alzheimer's, and so he was trying to figure out how to come back and take over the farm. So maybe back in 1976, we loaded up, moved back to Platte, South Dakota from Clovis, New Mexico, and he took over the family farm. So I grew up in the farm, graduated from Platte, and after graduation, I kind of had went down a bad path for a little bit, decided I need some structure in life, and reached out to a National Guard recruiter, and had some friends that were in the unit that I was looking to join, and joined the military probably in 1993. And that path just kind of kept going on for 30 years. You say thank you, and I enjoyed every minute of it. I was proud to put on the uniform and defend our country, and even a couple deployments. Another cool thing that came out of that was I met my wife. So we met each other on deployment, and shortly after we got back, that's when I proposed to her, and now we have 4 kids and just trying to do everything.
Well, I suppose we should be thanking her for her service, not only in the military, but for taking care of you as well, too.
Yeah, if I hadn't met her, I don't know what path I'd be on. She definitely keeps me corralled.
Know the feeling. One story you had told me just recently was about your dad, and you mentioned him in the Air Force. What's a cool story you just told me about how the two of you actually served together?
So ironically, my father and I deployed together in 2003.
That's crazy.
It is crazy. I was just telling, I talk about that every once in a while, and I was just telling a story the other day of how he would get upset with me because you just never, he said, don't ever volunteer for missions. And I couldn't stand to just sit around, and so there were some quirky, crazy missions that we were a part of, and I know he just shook his head and thought, what are you doing? But yeah.
So he served in Vietnam? And
He served in Vietnam. I think I told you, what was fulfilling for him was when he came home from Vietnam, he wasn't appreciated. When he came back in 2003, we were appreciated. People were behind us, they supported us, and he got to feel the love coming back in 2003, and I think that gave him some closure.
That's very cool.
Yeah.
Good. They deserve that.
Yes, yep, he did.
What's something, Mike, about your job here that most people maybe don't understand?
What we feel is something that's very simple, putting parts and pieces together of how critical communication and planning becomes. Not only from the very beginning of when drawings come to us to do the takeoff and give out bid price, to then the handoff of the sale and how they want to build it from grid line to grid line becomes critical, so that we can get the parts and pieces and out to the job site on time.
So one of the things that I know a lot of business owners, decision makers contemplate all the time is when is the right time to build. We mentioned at the very beginning that we were involved in this project as the CM for your main building, and then just recently helped you with a paint booth. What helped you guide that decision, and when was the right time to put the addition on, put the extra space? We
were going through a few things at that time, and depending on the project, I think we'd had some trusses that had come through the shop, and our door opening that is just to the north of us was smaller, and so we struggled to get some things in and out. We were also, at that time, we didn't have a very good paint facility. The building was small, it wasn't very tall, so the crane didn't work out to lift some of the product that we roll through there. So we were looking at how do we become more efficient. And then we were working with a company that came in, and we worked through how do we become more efficient in the shop to then get it out to the paint. And so we spent quite a bit of time and effort into reorging the shop. We basically moved everything in the shop to how we felt we were more efficient, because we have a lot of touches. We always say we pick things up and we set them down. And so to be able to have most of our heavy projects, big projects come through this bay and straight out to paint has really help us to become efficient and organized.
And I presume as Sioux Falls has grown, the project sizes and the intricacies of that have grown as well. Like some of the projects we've seen downtown have required bigger pieces, bigger materials. That has changed.
Correct. I've seen that in the 20 years that I've been here. The size of say, base plates has grown because the sizes have grown for the beams and columns and those type things. So we've had to increase some of our cutting capabilities. We got a new piece of equipment about 6-8 months ago that's helped us with some of that. We went through a stretch here as we were growing that we were outsourcing quite a bit of things, and it's always easier when you can keep it in-house. and for the most part, we're able to keep most things in-house.
Were you affected much at all during like pandemic times?
COVID?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think no different than anybody else. Building kind of slowed down. We tried to keep, everybody on staff, and we were successful at that. But had it not been for some of the programs, it would have made it a lot tougher to navigate through.
Yeah, I know in your facility, PPE is an important thing, so it wasn't new to you. It wasn't like, oh, guess what, now we got to wear PPE and distance ourselves. That was kind of already being done.
Correct. Yeah, it's the part of time that I'd like to forget.
I think we all would.
And we had went to kind of a day staff and a night staff to mitigate some of those distances, even though, yes, we're fairly spread out here, but it was more the office even. Right. And so, I'm glad we're past those times.
You have worked with a lot of the contractors in town, and you work with a lot of partners. As a team, how do you make that determination of who's a good fit for you to work with? How do you make those selections? Just kind of help other business owners know that they're, when making those tough decisions, what is it that guides you?
So I don't know that I have a great answer on this because most of our stuff is hard bid. Mm-hmm. And so we're putting out to multiple contractors, and depending on what CM wins that project, and if we're low, right, we go into business together, right? Mm-hmm. Partnerships are a big thing. Relationships are a big thing. And that, to me, has gotten tougher over the years because everybody has pushed. The time frames that we've got to put these buildings up is, we can't do it, to be honest with you. And so that's where that coordination and communication really comes into play, that we're all on the same page and we know what's expected. Mm-hmm. It's when there's no communication and things change in the middle of things that it becomes that scramble, and it becomes the frustrations, and it becomes the fire drills.
Yeah.
So have you ever had a project where maybe something along the lines of progress went sideways, but it actually strengthened the relationship?
Yeah, offhand, I don't remember one specific, but I would say that there's 2 or 3 projects for sure where, yes, and we were just talking about this the other day of kind of trying to either get back to, or more of that, all right, let's hit timeout for just that tiny minute. Let's regather ourselves. Let's get back on track and make sure that we're on the same page. And mm-hmm. that really goes a long ways. I mean, for both sides. Like, we want to help be solution based, and help take care of the contractor, no matter who that is.
And probably back to that communication piece again. And
yeah, communication's everything. We talk mm-hmm. about that here all the time. Mm-hmm. How do you either communicate without having to communicate a ton, or how much communication do you actually have to have? Like, right. Nobody wants to have meetings.
Yeah.
So the work that you do, the steel structure of a building is, literally the backbone of a building is what holds it up. And in your facility here, and a lot of, manufacturing plants, it gets exposed and you can see it, you can see how it's working. But in most cases, it gets covered up, it gets blocked. When you drive around Sioux Falls and you see the projects you've worked on, what do you see in your head that most people are overlooking or don't see? Because
number one, I'm always guessing, did we bid that project? Did we win that project? To be covered up doesn't bother me so much anymore. But like, one thing that we want to get better at is getting our employees out to the job sites to see the fruit of their labors, mm-hmm. to get to see it before it gets covered up. We have some projects where it is. Now architects are exposing some of that steel, and you get to see it. And I think one of the first things I do when I walk into a building is look around. I look at the ceiling and all those things. And we've done a few ornamental stairs here over the last few years that those are the things that make you really smile and understand the labor of what goes into that.
Really shows off the talent of your team.
Yeah, 100%.
I don't know, every project's important. Every project is your favorite one. But is there one that stands out that, like, your team really came together and it's something you're proud of that whenever you bring your family by and say, hey, we did that?
So one thing that I'm really proud of that we really like to do is schools. And being a part of the Harrisburg community and Sioux Falls community, we've done several schools around Sioux Falls, Harrisburg and T. And a few years ago, we did the Freshman Academy. And my oldest daughter was the first class in that building, and now I have a freshman in that building. And so to be able to help the communities as we try and bring up young people and educate them and stuff, that means a lot to me.
Absolutely.
So in your guys' role, I mean, you've done projects that are pretty small to projects that are huge, regionally. That process you mentioned from the set of plans where you're doing a takeoff, putting together a bid, submitting a proposal, you get the job. How many people are usually involved in the average size project?
So, I mean, in the shop, you've probably got 20 to 25 people that are involved in some facet of that project. In the office side of things, we've typically got a designated PM for that project. Our ops guy is overseeing all the projects. And then it might come back to the original estimator that took off the project for things that got tweaked along the way. So you're probably looking at, 25 people that touch that project.
You mentioned about the schedules are getting almost unattainable, unachievable, and for your guys' work, I mean, it's one thing just to get raw steel in and fabricate it, put it into the right places, but there's so much more that gets done before that on the design side, like Brad mentioned. I mean, that process of drawing it up gets done at least twice, from an architect and a structural engineer drawing it to your people then detailing it out with shop drawings. Can you kind of go in, what is that project lengthwise of how that, usually when you first hear about a project that you're bidding on to when you actually provide that steel?
So we would say the industry standard is about 12 weeks by the time we can get through drawings, have material here, and realistically ready to put it through the shop and get it to a job site. So 12 to 16 weeks. Even small size projects like just getting through the detail and the communication and the approvals takes a couple weeks, right? I think the side that we always get maybe frustrated with is when there's changes in the project. We know those are going to happen. That's just the way it is. But we live in an instantaneous world, and it's like you can't just click a button to go back and redetail that project. It might take another week or so to get drawings back out for approval, and so all that the clock is ticking, and that just continues to get closer and closer to what that schedule was. So it's a revolving kind of door all the time, and so that's kind of the things that we deal with on our side.
When I think about, like, as a kid, steel, I thought about the Pittsburgh Steelers and the mills. How has that side of the industry changed where you guys are ordering in materials? And, we could talk a little bit about tariffs and if that's been anything that's affected you guys.
So we don't typically buy from the mill. We buy from warehouses because then we can buy the closest length to the size that we need, so we have least amount of scrap. And we typically can get stuff from the warehouses for a week or less, let's say. So it's pretty quick turnaround, and realistically, we want to be 2 or 3 weeks ahead of that anyway. So material's sitting here, so when we're ready to go, we can cut and fabricate. Tariffs, I don't know that they affect us. So when we sell a project, we take some risk in either we wait and buy that material once drawings have been approved, or we buy material based off the estimate. And if things change, we've got steel sitting in our yard that we don't get to use in that project. So it's a risk almost every project. We tend to like to wait until we have approval drawings, but with tariffs and price increases, we'll lose most of our profitability if we sit and wait. So we've been buying steel right at the sale of the job here over the last few months.
And you can't just buy in bulk because it's specific steel you have to buy for each project.
Correct. Yeah. We've changed how we've done that. We used to stock, certain size materials, but every job is custom.
Right.
So it's some of that is hard to do.
For the last 6 years, I know in the construction world as a whole, but I imagine in your piece of that has been terribly challenging. We talked about COVID, and there was price increases and demand issues. Then we talk about tariffs the last couple year and a half. Now we've got conflict going on in the Middle East. How obviously there's another demand for steel for other things. How do you not drink every day?
Oh, I don't. That's probably something I shouldn't even answer. It's tough. I mean, any type of business I think is tough, I think the word tariffs and with interest rates the way they are, I think it's caused some fear, right? Mm-hmm. People are holding back. They're holding onto cash. They're waiting to see when it's going to get better, and so there's a lot of renovation projects going on, and not necessarily new buildings. And what we're seeing right now is things are slow across the country, and so competition is tight. Right. And so you're seeing more people coming into Sioux Falls that are looking for work and those type things.
Yep, we see that for sure.
When I
Go ahead.
Heard that you're involved in some like high school welding programs. Can you tell us a little bit about that and why that's important to P&M?
So, I mean, I think it's like everybody that's in our industry is looking for young talent and to try and keep young people interested in what we do. Everything's computer-based now, and that's kind of where people like to go. But bringing in and keeping that culture going of young welders, we're actually probably as young as we've ever been out here as far as fabricators, and it's fun to see people that like to come to work and work with the hands and work with the steel and stay motivated.
I know you mentioned Harrisburg School District that you've worked with, and I think your kids are in that district. I heard they're doing an apprenticeship program for different trades. I don't know if you've been.
I'm not real privy to that.
I just heard about it this week, so as I learn more information, okay, I'll let you know. But you mentioned technology too. People think a lot of times in manufacturing, and especially in a blue collar industry like steel, technology doesn't play as big a role, but it does. You guys have certainly upgraded some machines and equipment. Can you tell a little bit about what has changed in your world to make life more efficient, and maybe you can do more stuff with less people because of the technology that's changed? 20
plus years ago, everything was laid out by hand. Everything was drilled by hand. There was no automation. And then in 2007, we got our first piece of automation, which was just a drill line. Mm-hmm. And again, so we picked things up and set them down, and we sawed it, we set it down, we picked it up, we drilled it, we set it down, and then it went to a fabricator. And then it got set back down again, picked up, and outside for paint. Now we have a piece of equipment that does all those things in one machine. We've implemented tablets out here, so we're not sending drawings out here, and then when there's changes, and then going to try and grab all those drawings and right, get the corrections and drawings back out. That part of technology is it's been out there for a long time, but it's huge. Trying to think. How we QC with technology mm-hmm. is quite amazing and has made us better in making sure that we are getting the piece that when it gets out to site that it's going to fit right, and those erectors are not going to have problems with it.
So outside of looking for welders that you can teach or experienced welders, what would be another skill set that would be someone beneficial, like, to your point about the automation side of things?
I think certainly in the near future with more automation and robotics the way they are, you're going to have engineers out on the floor that are able to take care of the equipment and help troubleshoot and those type things. Again, what we look for now is just somebody with a good attitude that's going to show up each and every day and help us accomplish the mission of getting steel to the site.
That's easy to find, isn't it?
Oh, 100%. I can't even get that out of my kids.
We're going to talk about that. Well, let's talk about that right now. Obviously P&M has been a family business. You mentioned 3rd-Generation with you and Katrin. You've got kids. What does life look like outside for you? When you're not here, what are you doing? And what do you see your kids' future? What do you want them to know about what you're doing here?
That's a great question. That's hard. I try not to push my kids into doing something that that Dad does. They've got to find their own path, and I know they will. Kids outside of here, they're busy. They're really busy. It's hard to have a full-time job and then a full-time job chauffeuring for sure.
Yeah.
So what their interests actually come down to, I don't know. I've given them opportunities to do internships. That hasn't really panned out yet, so they'll find their own path.
You've had them here in the shop, I know, driving around.
Yeah, the boys
small
like to
jobs.
come here and mess around in the golf cart, and the boys probably have a slightly more interest in what Dad does, but the girls, they'll figure that out.
You haven't built any reinforced soccer goalies around here?
No, I should.
Soccer goals?
I should. Well, if I had one, they wouldn't use it anyway.
What's maybe one thing, Mike, that, if anything else, you hope they understand about what you do?
That this is fun. I think they get to see when Dad's had a bad day and maybe takes it out on them and doesn't mean to. I think they see that side of Dad. What I enjoy most about what we do is working with the customers and being problem solver and helping that person out in the field make sure that project comes together. And those days don't happen all the time because there are the fires to put out. But hopefully they see that Dad really does love what he does and does have steel running through his veins.
You mentioned growing up on a farm. Any aspirations? This is something near and dear to me, but any aspirations in the future of going back and staying involved in that? What's the future of the family farm?
I was telling that earlier today that my dad had come in here a few years ago and said, "Hey, when you coming back to the farm?" And I said, it's funny that you come here now and say that, not 20 years ago maybe. Right. I think there's probably aspirations of some type of hobby farming, if you want to call it. We definitely want to see the farm go to, the generation beyond us. I have 2 sisters and a brother that we'll see what happens when Dad is no longer with us. We know what his wishes are, and that is to keep the farm in the family. There's aspirations to get into some cattle, and maybe wear the hat.
I know the place you can go.
Yeah, and see what kids might think of going back to living in a small town and maybe running a farm. You never know.
Yeah, absolutely.
So how about, I know spare time is one of those things people kind of laugh at sometimes, but if you're not running kids all over, you're not at work, what's something you like to do?
Well, I like to golf. The last probably 20 years with kids and work and military, it's been tough to find time to do that. I'm actually going to get into a league this year for the first time in forever and see what I can do with myself instead of playing in scrambles all the time. So I do enjoy golfing. We travel a lot for sports, so it's hard to find a ton of hobbies. Someday, when it all slows down and my wife and I can reconnect and learn each other again, I think we'd both like to travel and do some of that stuff that we just haven't been able to. We've just been busy from the time we got married.
Unless it's to a soccer tournament. That's the
Correct.
traveling you get to do.
Yeah.
So here's a trick question. Do you go steel shaft on your golf clubs, or what do you?
Yeah, because if you go graphite, you're old.
You could probably fabricate your own shafts right here, couldn't you?
I could.
So we got a section we call it rapid fire, where we just ask some questions and get quick answers from you. First one was steel, concrete, or wood?
Steel, duh.
And why?
Because that's what we do. I love going into places and seeing steel.
There's a certain durability about it, obviously a rigidity.
Yeah, we say it stands the test of time.
Right, yeah.
Most underrated building in Sioux Falls that PM touched?
Oh, my God. let's come back to that.
Okay.
Here is your chance. Here's your opportunity. What is one thing that general contractors get wrong when they order steel? What's the one thing you could change about us if you could?
Again, I think clear communication from the sale of that project, to know exactly what your expectations are, and that they stay on that same task.
You know, I think a lot of what we've seen is it's not even just, well, communication is obviously the biggest part of it, but it's just that staying on top of it. You know, like there's a lot of expectation of, well, I did this and I'm waiting for somebody else. I'm just going to sit and wait. And
I think we're guilty of that too, right? So approval drawings go out, and then they've been out for
follow-up.
3 weeks or a month, and it's kind of like, hey, where are we at with
Right.
drawings? And then when we get them back, my perception is that general contractor believes that we're still on schedule, even though we've went past, and
right.
we've always got other projects behind, so we have to constantly do shifting.
Yeah.
Most complex or technically difficult project. Is there one that stands out that was a real challenge for the team?
Over the last few years with dairy barns, we've been doing some trusses for some of these barns that span, hundreds of feet. Those are always kind of fun too, because the typical beams and columns, it's just kind of repetition, even though it's different. But a truss you actually get to see put together in your shop before we ship it out to site.
Some of the tube steel we see behind us has got some curve to it that just sit outside too long in the rain and get warped, or
Yeah,
is that on
something
purpose?
like that. No, that's actually for a project we've got in Norfolk for a truss.
So are you curving that? Is that something you guys do?
We do not do that. That is one of the things that we do have to farm out.
Yeah. Something you're looking for in the future of
Maybe.
getting involved
Maybe.
in?
Depends. The rolled stuff is kind of few and far between.
Right, yeah.
And so you've got to have a pretty good presence in your shop for equipment to be able to do that.
What are the different processes of a finished product? Sometimes I know you're just putting primer paint on them. Sometimes they can be galvanized. Can you run through
Yeah,
those
so
processes?
most of our stuff gets the red primer.
Gray seems to be kind of taking over a little bit
Yeah,
more.
that's a topic here that we struggle with all the time, of switching between gray and red, and can they just do red? And
Right.
well, they called for gray, and so we have the ability to do both.
Yeah.
And then we also paint safety yellow on guard posts and things like that, and ladders. Galvanizing process is something that we do have to sub out, but that has, over the last few years, it seems like there's a lot of galvanizing in these projects. So we're running down to Sioux City once a week.
Really just to get galvanized.
Yeah.
With everything going on in Sioux Falls and how fast it's growing, what's like current P&M's backlog lead time right now?
We don't have as much backlog as I would like right now, but we're out 6 months. I always say one sale will cure months of hours of work in the shop. So there's still projects out there that we're looking at, and we're doing some things for some other customers to kind of fill those gaps. But overall, we're hoping that consumer confidence comes back and projects start becoming more plentiful, and that we get back to, hopefully mid-2000, kind of type stuff where it's just hustle and bustle.
I had a question for you. So you've mentioned before you run on EOS. You guys have done the EOS process, and
We
we're
do.
going through some of that. What is your 5-year, 10-year vision for P&M Steel? Where do you see that in the next decade?
Robotics keeps coming to the forefront. Still don't quite know how that fits into what our vision is. That landscape changes from year to year, as all technology does, and so it's kind of like, do you bite the bullet and know that that technology is already
Make that investment.
That's kind of the future, I believe. Whatever that is. Right now, there's not a lot of manufacturers out there that have a lot of the robotics. Everybody's still, we've got welders on the floor. That's how we operate.
Is there one funny P&M story in your 20 years that you can share?
Ooh, I don't know if I can share. God, you caught me off guard. Funny P&M story.
It's got to be some good Tate stories.
I did hear one Christmas party rumor about you having like a Santa skirt on.
I might have a photo of that.
I may have. It probably was alcohol induced.
You have a pretty good culture here. I mean, the people that work here are great. You've got good people. How do you maintain that, or how do you cultivate that culture within the group?
Yeah, I think we all talk about culture a lot, and how do we develop a really good culture. My philosophy in life has always been work hard, play hard, and sometimes we forget to play hard. And so it's showing them that you do really appreciate them. It's not the times when you're putting out fires and you've just got a scowl on your face and those type of moments, but you do. You appreciate the people, because without them, the work is not going to get done, and you want them to love it as much as you do, especially being an ESOP company.
Mm-hmm. Oh, you are. Can you explain that a little bit of how did that come about?
Tate started that back in probably early 2000s, I think, yes, we are employee owners. I think the culture, we still need to work on that of getting them to really understand what that means and how they affect everything that we do each day, and how we either, what's the term I'm looking for? How we either prosper in that, or we're all in it together.
Right. Yeah.
So along those lines, are you able to apply any of the skills that you learned from the military in running a steel company?
Yeah, I mean, yes, the leadership part. I think the communication part. The military is a little bit different, where we can really get on people, make them do push-ups or sit-ups or some of that type stuff, and it's a little bit different in the civilian world. But I've seen that. I've got friends that have got into hiring military veterans that have retired out, and they bring a different skill set.
For sure. In your 20 years here, I'm sure those first couple of years you maybe made a mistake or two. Can you remember one of the ones that stands out the most that you still can look back on and say you've changed what you've done because of that?
I've made a lot of mistakes here, for sure. Trying to think. One thing that I probably learned the hard way was you can't please everybody. And when you've got multiple contractors hounding about time schedules, and you're trying to just kind of piece and part and get everybody something to their job site, that doesn't work, because it doesn't work for the contractor, and it doesn't work for us, because we're having to constantly shift in the shop. So we've worked really hard on, letting our customers know that, hey, we need the drawings, here's your time slot, and by the way, you've passed that, we've got to move you. It's still working with them to make sure that we hit a schedule as close as possible, but trying to please multiple people just doesn't work.
All contractors think they're the only ones, and their project is the most important.
And I get that. That's the world we live in, right?
So where do you see the future of P&M Steel the next 5, 10, 20 years?
Hopefully with me gone. We all have aspirations of growth, and we want to do growth the right way. We want to do it, efficiently, profitability. So we're not trying to overtake the world, but we'd like to have we'd like to be able to have a bigger, what's the term I'm looking for?
Footprint?
Yeah, we'd like to have a bigger footprint in not just Sioux Falls, but South Dakota.
Within the market.
Yeah.
What is your servicing region?
I would tell you that there's no place we wouldn't go. Trucking will take us out of some of that areas, but we get probably about as far west as Pierre, and all the way up to, Aberdeen and into Minnesota and Iowa.
Where can people find you? Physical location, website?
Well, we're right here in Sioux Falls at 4401 North Westport. You can find us at pnmsteel.net, or give us a call. We enjoy talking to people and taking what the customer's dream is and then making that a reality.
And we know you do a lot of large commercial projects, but if somebody were to come in and say, hey, I want this ornate staircase for my house.
We do a lot of small projects where either somebody comes in and needs a piece of steel, whether it's an angle or a piece of plate, or as the houses have gotten bigger, beams to carry the loads have gotten bigger. Decks have required steel and railing and stuff like that. So there's not much that we would turn away.
Anytime there's a big span of windows, something's got to support that load. So a lot of times steel's used for that, or even in basements when somebody wants a big open basement, you got to put some beams in.
Yeah, we do a lot on that side. So small to big, it doesn't matter. We
do it all.
We want to help the customer.
Well, Mike, I want to thank you for taking the time to join us today. Appreciate hearing your story, getting to know a little bit more about P&M, and look forward to the next hang with you.
Yeah, actually, I got to be honest. I was a little nervous to do this. It's a little out of my realm. You don't let steel guys out in front of cameras and microphones. So I've enjoyed the time, and I've enjoyed our relationship and that, and so I appreciate that.
Absolutely. You did a great job.
We appreciate you listening. Everything we do is a collaboration, and we appreciate you being here to share this with us.
Yeah, our goal is always the same, to build relationships, to build structures, and to tell the stories that we've experienced along the way.
Feel free to drop us a comment, share it with a friend, and like this podcast.
Or call me if you just want to talk about cows.
So until next time,
keep building. No, get out of here.